Hello everyone, and welcome into the Friday walkthrough. I'm Cole Carmody alongside Monte Spiller. K-State drops a tough game to Texas, 34-27, but now they get ready to go take on Baylor. Two important games. K-State dropped the first one. They get a chance for redemption against Baylor on Saturday.
Yeah, I hate that we lost, but the good news is we're still alive. A lot of times when you lose to a Texas, especially at home, it was a big game. A lot was on the line, but the season's not over. And we still have an opportunity to get a win this coming Saturday and get back into the Big 12 championship talk, like one game at a time, 1-0, like Coach Kleiman likes to say. But we'll see how it goes.
It'll be a fun time. We're going to talk about the game against Texas. We'll also preview the game against Baylor. But before we go any further, we want to let you know we're sponsored by our good friends at the Part-Time Beverage Company. The first half is sponsored by the Club Special. The second half is sponsored by the Cape Cod. Make sure you're hitting subscribe on the YouTube channel. Go PowerCat YouTube posts a lot of great K-State content. We're still always looking for new people. Make sure you hit subscribe and make sure you subscribe to GoPowerCat.com. So as we break down this Texas game, there's a whole lot of different places to start, but I think the best way to go about this is to start talking about the very beginning of the game, the first half. K-State goes into the locker room down 31-10, but there was a lot that went into that. What were your just overall initial impressions of the first half on Saturday?
There were no surprises, really. We talked about it. I knew Texas O-line and B. John Robinson was going to be a problem. We talked about it. We knew he would get 100 yards. And I would hope he wouldn't get more than 150. But, the guy's a grown man. And like I said, he's going to be a first-round draft pick if he decides to come out this year. And somebody's going to get a special player. So Texas O-line in the running game was very impressive, to be expected. The quarterback did a lot better job of getting the ball out fast. He did a good job of getting the ball out, putting the receivers in position to make plays. But probably the most damaging, in my opinion, play was the second or third play of the game when Brents was called for targeting. He's a leader on the defense, he's a leader on the team, and he can lock down any receiver one-on-one, and that put a big challenge ahead of us in the game.
I think that play was important because maybe not for the outcome of the game, but for the overall atmosphere of the game, if that makes sense. Jacob Parrish came in and did a really good job.
No, he did.
And I just wonder how much they had to change the game plan with Brents out, because we talked to some of the guys, and they said the biggest thing really was just communication, because Julius is a communicator. He's a leader on that defense. Mm-hmm. He helps get the signals in. He helps get the play calls in. With Jacob out there, he's just trying to fill a role. Yeah. So maybe they had to change some things defensively. When you don't – he's more the nickel guy. And so when he practices that nickel role, it's a completely different role than having to go out on the edge and cover and be basically the number one cornerback.
Yeah.
So that play was important for a lot of different reasons. I want to ask you about the targeting call, not necessarily the call, but the rule in general, because that's been a hot topic around K-State football this week, is obviously because of that play, but should it have been targeting? Should it not have been targeting? I'm of the opinion it was the right call by the rule that was targeting.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of things that this offseason the NCAA needs to do to try and fix that rule.
I'm with you 100%. By the rule, it was targeting. You got to make that call. But I'm not a fan of automatically disqualifying an individual for the rest of the game or for the half, and then the beginning of the next game, the first half. Mm-hmm. The game is too fast and physical for guys to be able to control their body. He was making a play on the ball, and it puts a defensive guy in a position. What do you want him to do? Allow the receiver to catch the ball, then attempt to make a tackle, or do what he's coached? You make a break on the ball, you run through a guy. Keep it. And I get it. It was targeting by the rule, but he was in a position to make the play, and he led with his shoulder, but because your body reacts and recoils, it's going to have some helmet-to-helmet contact. Now, my thing is, if it happens twice in the game, sure, disqualify a guy for the rest of the game, but he shouldn't be disqualified for the next game because it's a new game. I don't agree with that, and give him the first one, give him a 15-yard penalty, but allow him to stay in the game. Mm-hmm. But like you said, the NCAA needs to reevaluate that rule and look at it, because so many games have been dictated and changed because of that rule. I'm all for safety, but there has to be some human element to it.
And you think about last year, go back to last year, Daniel Green, the same situation. Mm-hmm. He was in the beginning part of the year. It's an interesting rule, and it's definitely something that the league needs to look at. But that play in particular, again, I think it completely affected the game. But the bottom line is Bijan Robinson was an absolute stud in the first half. I had never seen him play in person, much like a lot of fans at the game. He didn't. If you weren't at the game in 2020, obviously the COVID restrictions, not a lot of people were. You wouldn't have got a chance to see him. He didn't play last year in Austin. he looked incredible. The way he was able to cut on a dime and get horizontal and then get vertical, it was impressive. It's something I haven't seen. I mean, as great as Deuce Vaughn is elusive, right? He is good because he is able to make people miss. He's able, once he gets in space, he's gone. Bijan Robinson is just different. I mean, it's hard to compare the two running backs because they're completely different players. And I wouldn't necessarily say that Bijan is that much better than Deuce, but Bijan is just different, and he completely torched K-State's defense. I honestly, we knew it would come down to tackling. This game, to me, is on the defense, especially the defensive backs, not being able to come down and tackle until the second half when they had finally had a chance to adjust to it.
Yeah, and going back to Bijan, I was there 2 years ago to watch him play, and that was my first time being exposed to him in person. And I remember talking to my buddy I was with. I said, that's a grown man. And I don't think people realize how physical he is. In pads, everybody looks big, but up close, he is a physical specimen. The guy's put together. He's solid. And a lot of times, guys just bounce off of him. In the first half, it wasn't that K-State wasn't in position to make the play, but they were just bouncing off of him. And he's done it all year. Any team that he played against, he gives them problems. And I knew that he would get K-State problems because we're a physical team. We fly around, we make tackles, but he's just different. And he's kind of every team has a guy that's their kryptonite. He's our kryptonite.
And Daniel Green played in this game, which I think was a good thing for K-State. He obviously was not 100%. You could tell he was not moving around, and maybe it's because he hadn't gone full speed at practice, just trying to get back into the flow of things. You would think for Baylor, having gotten back to speed a little bit, he should be a little bit better, see a few more snaps. He was not 100%. But really, again, in this 3-3-5, it's massive for defensive backs to come down and make tackles. And how many times did we see a safety who was in position to make a tackle? Either A, he just whiffed, or just Bijan Robinson made him miss, or he just bounced right off of him. That's not something we're accustomed to seeing with this K-State defense. When we talk about Baylor, we'll talk a little bit more about their rushing attack. I don't think that'll happen again because in the second half on defense, K-State held Texas to 3 points, gave them a chance to win. Looking at the offensive side of the ball, to me, the big storyline is really in the first half, K-State was matching Texas for the first basically quarter, and then they started to slow down. Adrian Martinez throws the pick. They go into the locker room down 3 scores. What were your overall impressions of the offense in the first half?
I was kind of confused. Like you said, the first couple of series we had the ball, we moved it at will. We were mixing it up. Deuce was in the pass game. Deuce was in the run game. Adrian looked comfortable. They had time. There was a pocket. The O-line did a good job, and all of a sudden they hit a wall, and we became stagnant. I don't know if it was play calling. I don't know if guys were injured. I'm not sure what happened, but we couldn't match Texas energy, and all of a sudden we're down 31-10 a half. And it's kind of like, man, I never gave up because I knew we had the capability to come back and do some good things. But against a good Texas team, at home, regardless, or on the road, that's a significant amount to come back from.
I think part of it was there was everybody in the stands. If you'd watched Texas, if you'd watched K-State, you knew this K-State team was not going to give up. Yeah. But you also knew Texas was going to Texas. They were going to let K-State back in that game, and they did. They really did. Excuse me. K-State took full advantage of that. They just couldn't get it done in the end. To me, I want to go back to the last series for K-State on offense in the first half. Adrian Martinez throws an interception, his first one of the year. Simple read. The Texas linebacker read his eyes. He took a deeper drop than Adrian thought he would. Tried to throw it to Malik. Texas linebacker jumps in front of it, picks it off. They end up getting a touchdown. That was a huge play. It was.
And when he threw it, and it's easy for me as a fan from the stands to see the backer dropping deeper than he normally would. And why would you throw that? But then, when you got guys flying in front of you and they've been bringing pressure all game, and they probably were dropping more shallow prior to that, but you have to understand late in the quarter, a longer distance, the backers are thinking they're not going to run, probably a pass, they may get a deeper drop. And the guy was athletic. He did a great job of dropping, getting underneath the pass, get an interception, and set them up for a touchdown. But, it's one of those things where 9 times out of 10, Adrian doesn't make that mistake. But you got to remember, he had been out for a game and a half.
Right.
And he was just kind of getting back to the speed of the game, knowing what's going on. No matter how much of a veteran player you are, you're still human, and you have to shake it off. Second half, it looked a lot better. But first half, there were some times where you could tell he was a little rusty.
Almost a month when you factor in the bye week. He hadn't played in game action. To me, and I've said this throughout the week, but I firmly believe that Adrian Martinez played a great game.
Yeah.
He had one
mistake.
bad pass.
Yeah, I agree.
And, I mean, people want to make the argument about Will Howard. I'm not really in that conversation because I think Adrian does things that Will does differently.
Yes.
Adrian Martinez was able to escape the pocket, able to make plays because Texas was bringing the rush. He made one bad throw, and unfortunately it cost K-State. But the turnover battle was still 2-2.
Yep, it was. And a lot of people, because we lost the game, it's easy to put blame on the quarterback. That's human nature. Any team, when the Chiefs were rolling and Mahomes had a couple of bad games, they were like, oh, Mahomes, like, you guys are crazy. Mahomes is still a great quarterback. Stop it. Same with us. It's one of those things where when you lose, they want to blame the quarterback. But when you're winning, even if he has a bad game, we win, people tend to overlook that. It was a closer game, and we still had the opportunity late to win it. We just couldn't finish the deal. We kind of shot ourselves in the foot early, came back, regrouped. Defense stepped up big time. The one play when Savage stopped Bijan on 3rd and short, it was huge. So we had our chances. We just have to play a complete game.
And Texas played a lot of zone against K-State on Saturday. And I don't know if that was to try and contain the scrambling ability of Martinez a little bit. Instead of having K-State run a bunch of deep routes and the defensive backs have their backs turned and Martinez can take off and run. I think it worked to Adrian's advantage, to be honest. He was able to find those pockets in the zone, deliver the passes. I thought he looked good in the second half. I mean, that's probably one of the better halves of football he's played, especially considering everyone in the stadium knew he had to throw the ball. They're down by 3 scores, and he engineered a comeback. Unfortunately, on that last play, a defensive lineman made a play. He got the ball out. Texas won the game, but I don't think with the way that the first half ended, you could have asked for a better opportunity. You have the ball, 2.5 minutes left. Go tie the game. They weren't able to, but again, I almost wonder if this was just a buzzsaw they ran into with Texas.
Texas was on. We weren't stumbling in, but I feel like we weren't at our best. I know we weren't at our best. And kudos to Texas. They won the game. I'm not making excuses. We play them again. It'd probably be a different outcome. Bijan will still get his numbers, but as a whole, I feel like we can come out successful. One thing I did notice at watching the game, and a lot of people haven't talked about that, our return teams did not look good, especially kickoff. The receivers, they had time to catch the ball. They weren't kicking it into the end zone, and we couldn't set up a return. And Texas guys were flying down, beating our guys to the block, and making our returners cut sideways rather than getting upfield. So that was huge, too. We started with a long field most of the time.
There was multiple times where K-State would miss a key block on kickoff, and Malik Knowles would get tackled on the 15.
Sure enough.
I mean, it's amazing how one block can spring a big return, or it can just be a great play by the kickoff team. I have a feeling that's going to be an emphasis this week in practice. I don't know them. We were around this team an awful lot, and it's pretty easy to say when we know what they're going to work on. That's going to be something they work on. I look for the kickoff return team to maybe make a big play in Waco this weekend.
I would be shocked if they don't.
It was an interesting night on special teams, but again, overall, this team is going to be fine. I think we're obviously going to talk about Baylor here coming up shortly, but that was a game I think they're ready to put it behind them. They're ready to move on. Everybody's healthy now, for the most part, knock on wood. So, again, it was just kind of one of those games where they didn't get the job done. After the game, I felt like they knew that they missed an opportunity, but they also understand there's 3 more opportunities, and they still have a great chance to make it to Arlington.
Absolutely. They got a lot to play for. They're regrouped. They'll be okay. I'm confident in this team.
We're going to talk about the game in Waco between Kansas State and Baylor coming up in the second half. Once again, we are sponsored by the Part-Time Beverage Company, and we will see you after this short break. Hey everyone, and welcome back in here to the Friday walkthrough. I'm Cole Carmody, that's Monte Spiller. We're getting set to break down K-State versus Baylor down in Waco on Saturday, but we want to let you know we are sponsored by the Part-Time Beverage Company. This half in particular is sponsored by the Cape Cod. So let's talk about this game because Baylor is coming off of 3 straight wins. They were 3-3. Everybody wrote them off. They fought their way back into the Big 12 title conversation. Now they're 6-3. They're right on the outside of the college football playoff rankings. With a win, they would probably vault into that discussion. But nonetheless, they're 6-3. Coming back home, it's going to be a blackout in Waco.
I saw that.
It just feels like every time K-State goes on the road, not only do they play at night, it's got to be something. In Iowa State, it was the blackout. In TCU, it's the blackout. Now in Baylor, it's the blackout. I don't know. Maybe it's just something about the Cats coming to town.
I don't know, but I will tell you, and we were talking about it earlier, people forget Baylor won the Big 12 last year. And, they started kind of slow, and they picked it up winning the last 3. And they're a well-coached team. Honestly, I'm surprised that the coach is still there. I'm shocked that some big program haven't came and swoon him away with some more money. But he does a phenomenal job. They have great athletes down there in Waco, and they continue to compete. Their fan base is rowdy, and like you said, the Blackouts is going to probably put them even in a more rowdier environment. But our Cats have went on the road before and shut up crowds, and I'm hoping the same happens this Saturday.
The road warrior mentality seems to be real with this group. Yeah. We talked to them on Tuesday, and they said, we like it when everybody's against us. We like it when our back's against the wall, and we're excited to go down there. After being at home for 2 games, it almost feels like a good thing they get to go on the road. Because when you go on the road, you kind of just got to bond together. This group is so together. This might be the best thing for them, going into that raucous environment. Down in Waco, it's a big game. It's a night game. I'm looking for this team to bounce back in a very strong fashion. It's going to be a close game. Make no mistake, but this is an old-fashioned football game.
Yeah.
As we talk about this Baylor team, it's truly remarkable how many running backs they have, first of all. Let's just go through and break this down. So, the leading rusher against Oklahoma, Craig Squirrel Williams. His nickname is Squirrel.
Squirrel.
If you watch him on the broadcast, they'll just refer to him as Squirrel. I had to double check. It's like his name is Craig and his nickname is Squirrel. So
that's awesome.
Squirrel Williams led them in rushing, but on the season, Richard Reese has led them in rushing, a freshman. What's even more remarkable is neither one of those guys are listed as the starter on the Baylor depth chart. That belongs to Tway Williams, I believe, is what I wrote down. I can't even read my own handwriting. There you go. But nonetheless, they have a group of about 4 or 5 running backs that they'll use. Somebody made the comparison in North Dakota State when Chris Kleiman was at.
That's a good comparison.
When Chris Kleiman was up there, they have all these running backs that they rotate in. As a defense, I feel like that presents unique challenges for you when you have all these guys rotating in at running back.
Oh, absolutely, because you have to prepare for each and every one of them, and each back presents something different, and I'm pretty sure Baylor has packages for each back as well, not traditional zone or sweep and whatnot, but I feel like K-State has athletes to match each running back, and it's going to be a challenge, but our backs are already against the wall. You don't want to look at it this way, but if we lose this game, you pretty much can forget about Big 12 championship game because there's 4 other teams that are in position the same as we are, including Baylor. So it's a game that we have to understand. We have to win this to give ourselves a chance. We're bowl eligible. That's great. Taking nothing away from that because for seniors, they deserve to go to a bowl game. But let's not stop at a bowl game. Let's go to the Big 12 championship, win it, and then go to a bowl game and see what happens. So this Baylor game is important. Our defense, they're healthy. Daniel Green hopefully be back to full speed, if not already. And let's go get back into the conversation of a Big 12 contender.
This win would push K-State over the hump, I think, because while you're still needing a Texas loss, I am of the opinion that Texas putting 12 quarters together consecutively, I can't see that happening.
Go Frogs.
I just can't see that happening. I think that TCU-Texas game, actually, TCU has a great chance to win that game. We'll look at that more at the end of the show, but with this game, K-State game in particular, this is, like I mentioned at the top, this is an old school affair. Baylor ran a lot of I formation against Oklahoma. I look at that Oklahoma game, and while I know that Oklahoma cannot stop a runny nose on defense,
yes, indeed,
Baylor ran the ball down their throats. I feel like K-State is going to match their physicality. They were tested physicality-wise against Texas last week. Maybe that gives them an advantage, having understood, hey, they had been the more physical team in every single game they played. Maybe they weren't against Texas. I think that's a fair assessment if you think that Texas was more physical than K-State. It was close, if not. Now they've gotten that challenge out of the way. Will they be up to it against Baylor? I think yes. I think the line of scrimmage is going to dictate this game. If K-State can win, especially on defense, if they can win on the line of scrimmage there, they're having a great opportunity to win this football game. And anytime you depend on guys like Felix Enudike, Uzama, Eli Huggins, it usually works out for K-State.
Yeah, and taking nothing away from our defense last week, but I feel like Texas O-line as a whole was more physical than our D-line throughout the whole game. And then for Felix, he was getting double and triple teamed the majority of the game. And I'm sorry, Baylor can't afford. They got 4 or 5 dynamic running backs, but none of them are Bijan Robinson. And it's nothing against those guys, but they aren't. So you can't really afford to allow a running back. Baylor can't trust that the running back's going to make plays like Texas does. So they're going to have to take some guys and double our D linemen and our DNs for that matter. But with that being said, coming off a physical game against Texas, K-State will be prepared for Baylor, and no matter what they throw at them. And it's going to be a battle up front. And our linebackers, Moore and Green and Nick Allen, they are physical players. And if Baylor wants to run the ball, that's good old-fashioned smash mouth football, what K-State defense loves to play against. And our corners and safeties like to be physical, so we welcome the challenge.
This is going to be a game straight out of the 90s.
Yes.
This is going to be a good old-fashioned Big 12 matchup. I, for one, cannot wait to see this because it just feels like one of those games that's going to come down to the very end. Now, Blake Shapen, the quarterback, is an interesting case because he comes in as the backup against K-State last year. Gary Bohannon, who's now at South Florida, was the starter. Bohannon gets hurt. Shapen comes in, and everybody had never heard of this kid. It's his first action. He was a baseball player originally, decided to come to Baylor to play football, and he just lights the world on fire against K-State. And then the rest of the conference, the rest of the season, obviously the rest is history. Shapen had a really good ending to his freshman year. He struggled a little bit this year, maybe a little bit of a sophomore slump. He's thrown 6 interceptions. He'll give you the ball away. You just have to go up and grab it. I think if K-State tries, if they can stop the running attack of Baylor and make Blake Shapen beat you, that has to be the plan.
Yeah, and I feel like we can do it. You know, he scares me a little bit with his legs. Not a whole lot, but enough to keep plays alive. And we have to be very disciplined with our coverage. And, you know, when he scramble rules have to come into play where our DBs lock onto the receivers and not give them a free throw. But last year when he came in against us, he came in a situation where there's really wasn't any pressure. So, and anybody who knows the game of football, who watched enough football, understand a lot of times when the backup quarterback comes in and balls out, people are screaming, oh, he should have been a starter from day one. No. He came in, there was no pressure. If he made a mistake, he's a freshman, backing up a guy, it is what it is. So he could play free. Now that pressure's on him, like you said, it could be a sophomore slump. He's made more mistakes. He throws interceptions. So there's opportunity for K-State to take advantage of that, and I'm anxious to see how they respond.
And some receivers to keep your eye out on for Baylor. Gavin Holmes is the leading receiver. And last week against Oklahoma, they ran some reverses, jet sweeps with neighbors. He had a big game. He scored at least 1 touchdown off the top of my head that I can remember. So they have some dynamic playmakers on offense, but they also hang their hat, I think, more so on the defensive side. And so as we talk about this K-State offense and the Baylor defense, to me, it's all about what K-State does. Because K-State is talented enough on offense to move the ball on anybody. We've seen that. They put up a ton of points in the second half against Texas, and they've put up a lot of points against every single team they've played. They've really been in the game because of the defense, but they have scored with their opponents, which is something, besides the Tulane game, that is something that is going to keep them in the game as well. I think that this offense is going to be able to do things. Baylor is a physical defense. Dave Aranda, who has not lost to Chris Kleiman yet, is a defensive-minded coach. But this Baylor team has not seen Colin Klein as offensive coordinator. I'm fascinated to see what he draws up with Adrian Martinez back to being more healthy now. Cade Warner and Malik Knowles are a little banged up. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. Kleiman said he anticipates them both being able to play, which is good. But I really feel like there's going to be some things that we haven't seen in a while. Baylor ran the jet sweep a lot against Oklahoma. We have not seen Malik Knowles run a jet sweep since the very first play of the game.
No.
I'm not saying that's going to happen, but they have got to try and find ways to get the ball on the edge because I feel like the speed of Baylor is not the speed of Texas, not the speed of Oklahoma State. K-State is in a very good position to where if they can use the running game to open up some of these bigger plays, they might be able to make some shot plays.
Yeah, and K-State we need to start fast. You know, we need to score early and often. And Baylor's one of those teams, in my opinion, where if you get up on them, 17 points, 21 points, they struggle to battle back and compete with you. And you talked about, you know, what offensive-wise we can do. People forget, and we don't, but last week, Stennett had a great game. And he wasn't talked about a whole lot. I wouldn't be surprised to see him even more involved with the game planning this week going into Baylor. Like you said, smash mouth football, physical. He is what you call physical, and he does a good job of it as well. But I'm curious to see what Coach Klein does come up with. But Baylor is one of those schools and one of those teams where they start early, they're going to fight you, they're going to be hyped up, they're hopping around on the sideline, they're talking to you. And if you allow them to get into your head, it can be a long day. But if you get up on them early and shut them up, you can control the game. And I'm hoping that's what the Cats can do come Saturday.
And I feel like there's always, when you're playing a night game on the road, weathering the storm.
Yeah.
They're going to have a punch. At some point, it's going to be there. K-State will face some adversity. But it's how do you weather the storm? How do you get back up off the mat or avoid that big punch.
Yeah.
There's going to be there will be big plays that K-State will give up or that Baylor will have. They picked off Dylan Gabriel 3 times in the first half on Saturday. This defense is lengthy, they're long, they're athletic, but how does K-State, again, avoid giving up those massive plays? We've only seen Adrian Martinez throw 1 interception. He's lost some fumbles. Fumbles are a part of the game, but how do you limit those interceptions? How do you limit those game-changing, momentum-changing plays? If K-State can just find a way to be steady, to move the ball down the field, again, I think that they need to get the ball on the outside, but the way that they've ran the ball inside of the tackles, when they win, it's because they are able to establish the inside running game. Yeah. If you can establish the inside running game, that opens everything else up.
Yeah, and the difference between us and Oklahoma, you talked about them picking them off 3 times last week. Oklahoma's built to pass. They're built to throw the ball around. We are built to run first. We have a good passing game, but our meat and potatoes are the run game with Martinez and with Giddens and with Deuce. That's what we do in our O-line. They take pride in it. Baylor's built for speed. They're built to stop guys because the Big 12, think about it, we are a passing conference. Their secondary and linebackers, they aren't the biggest guys, but they move well in space. They're built to stop the pass. K-State wants to run the ball, which I think puts us in an advantage. So we will get the run game going, force Baylor to do some things that they're not normally used to doing as far as scheme-wise, and then we can get the ball thrown over the top once they put more guys in the box.
I look for some quarterback run, quarterback run this week. There was questions about if Adrian would play on Saturday against Texas. There's no questions now. He's back to being as healthy as probably he has been since that Iowa State game. He's had a lot of time to rest. He could have played against Oklahoma State. Decided not to. They decided to go with Will Howard. He's back to getting more healthy. Look for some design quarterback runs, some RPOs. We didn't really see that. I almost wonder if it's because they were trying to protect him a little bit. This week, you got to go. This is a must-win game if you're K-State. We talk about that. A must-win. This is a must-win game. They're going to need some help to get into the Big 12 championship. Like I mentioned, before we get to our predictions to end the show, I do want to touch on this. TCU and Texas play. That's a huge game. Texas is a touchdown favorite. Again, Texas can beat anybody. They've shown that they can play with anybody. I think TCU finds a way to get that game. I really do. And K-State's going to know because they'll be playing when that game is over. So it'll be an interesting day of college football in the Big 12, that's for sure. But again, just a massive day overall.
It's a lot going on. And as much as I dislike the fact that we lost last Saturday, the way the conference is lined up now, it makes it fun. And it makes it must-watch TV because as a fan base, you have to get excited because your team, 6 of the 10 teams are in that race. And so these games this week matter. Not just K-State and Baylor, but most of the games matter at some point. Last week, KU became bowl eligible. Good for them. And some schools are fighting for bowl eligibility still, but some teams are fighting to get into the Big 12 championship. Right now, TCU is the front runner. They beat Texas. It's a highly likely they'll probably be there against K-State, against whoever, but it's fun, and I'm excited.
It's going to be a blast, and what's crazy about this conference is every single team, 9 games into the year, still has a chance to make a bowl game. West Virginia's down there at 3-6, so they're struggling, but the hope's not dead yet. I think that makes what makes this conference amazing. So getting back to this K-State Baylor game, let's get into our picks. We were both dead wrong last week. I kind of made it sound like K-State was going to kick their butt. So did you. We were wrong. Texas showed up, and they played well. They beat K-State. But this week, I think it's a different story. I'll let you pick first.
Yeah, I was wrong last week, and I felt like it would have been a home game in Harley Night. The boys would be pumped up, and they were, and I felt like we played better than what we did. But, it's okay to be wrong. That's why we're human. This week, I think it'll be not as a high-scoring game, but it'll be a physical game for sure. I'm going 28-21 Cats.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a one-score game as well. I've said 27-24 K-State. Okay. I do think K-State will win this game. The spread is 3. If they don't win, I think they'll cover. But, again, I think K-State, this is a bounce-back game. This is a get-right game. K-State has not lost 2 in a row yet this season.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens on Saturday night. I think K-State gets it done. Money agrees. Thanks, everybody, so much for listening to the Friday Walkthrough. We're sponsored by the Part-Time Beverage Company, and we will talk to you next Friday.